Deputy Paul Murphy.
Thanks, Laskin Corla. Taoiseach, this morning I visited the picket line of medical scientists at Tala Hospital. They're among the over 2,000 members of the Medical Laboratory Scientists Association who are on strike today. By the way, the public support for them and the support from patients was quite overwhelming. These are the hidden heroes of our health service. They're the people who process test samples for COVID, who do blood tests, who test urine and stool samples. They've been under intense pressure during the COVID crisis, and many are now suffering burnout as a result of problems with recruitment and retention, which mean that 1 in 5 medical scientist places are currently unfulfilled. Their work is absolutely vital for modern medical treatment. The medical services we all rely on depend on them being there and carrying out their specialised work. But the government, in its mistreatment of these workers, have brought us to the point of a very serious crisis now. Over 10,000 outpatient appointments were cancelled today as a result. These hidden heroes are shamefully paid 8% less than clinical biochemists who do a very similar job. Pay parity was recommended back in 2001 by an expert group. That was accepted by the HSE and the Department of Health, but more than 2 decades on, it has not been implemented. The workers even described to me a situation whereby laboratory aides have a starting salary higher than that of medical scientists. So you have a situation where many people start over the summer as laboratory aides, because they can't start then as medical scientists, and then have to take a pay cut in order to become the more highly qualified medical scientists. Now, like most workers across the country, they are feeling the impact of the cost of living crisis. Their rent is going up, their electricity is going up, their petrol or diesel is going up, but their wages are not going up. Enough is enough for them. They need action on pay parity so they can survive. They need action to fill the 1 in 5 medical scientist positions that are unfilled as a result of the underinvestment in our health service. The strength of anger and of feeling of these workers was demonstrated by the vote in favour of industrial action back in November, where they voted 98% in favour of action. They were due to strike in March. They postponed that in order to facilitate further negotiations, but there was no meaningful offer from the HSE. Now they had no choice but to go ahead with strike action today. If there isn't meaningful negotiations, they will go ahead with 2 days of strike action next week and 3 days the following week. They're looking for you to intervene, to direct the HSE to sit down with the workers' representatives and to agree to grant pay parity and to fill the unfilled posts.
First of all, as I did yesterday, again I take the opportunity to recognise the hugely important work, vital work carried out by medical scientists and their role in respect of the functioning of our health service. They're dedicated, they're professional, and very, very committed, and have been for many, many years, and particularly during the pandemic in particular. There is a long-standing concern, and the Medical Laboratory Scientists Association have had an ongoing long-term concern in relation to pay and career structure of the medical scientist grade. They want pay parity between medical scientists and clinical biochemists. The health sector management have been engaging with the MLSA regarding these issues under the existing public service agreement. Now, as I said, the public service agreement group comprised of union and civil service representatives with an independent chair met on May the 11th to consider the matter. They recommended that the matter be immediately referred to the WRC and that industrial peace be maintained in the meantime. There was engagement between the parties yesterday at the WRC. I believe the parties should continue at the WRC. Ultimately, industrial disputes of this kind have to be resolved through the existing labour and industrial relations mechanisms. That is the most effective way to do this, because there are implications, there always are consequences, relativities, and so, it's not, these issues are never simple or straightforward in industrial relations terms. particularly within the health services, it potentially has further wider repercussions. So all of those issues have to be teased through and worked through, and the most important forum to do that is WRC or whatever forum within the industrial relations machinery is optimal for the resolution of this particular dispute. I would hope that whilst talks are continuing that the strike action could be lifted, because it will and does impact on patients. Of that there is no doubt, given the central role and the very important role that the medical scientists perform within our health service. Scientists perform within our health service.
Thanks. I mean, the Taoiseach describes this as a long-standing issue, and yes, for workers suffering with low pay, 21 years is very long-standing when you have an expert group recommendation and then it's simply not being implemented. Throughout this whole process, there has been a passing of the buck. When the MLSA negotiate with the HSE says, oh, that's the problem is we can't get the money from DEPR. But DEPR isn't in the room in the WRC, for example. So does the Taoiseach agree, if he's going to point to the WRC, that DEPR should be in the room at the WRC for the negotiations? They're the ones who are doling out the money or not doling out the money, as the case may be. And secondly, I would urge you also not to pass the buck. I mean, ultimately, you're the Taoiseach. You're the head of the government. It's a very simple issue in terms of pay parity. It's an issue that has been recognised by the expert group. It's an issue that was agreed to be implemented by the HSE and the Department of Health. So you should send a direction to the HSE and to DEPR to say, we're going to address these workers' very legitimate concern, particularly in the context of the cost of living crisis, where these workers are owed an 8% pay rise when inflation is now at 8%, that at the very least this is what these workers need. If the government doesn't act, well then you have the responsibility. Like just asking the workers to lift the strike action, when they did that previously, meaningful negotiations didn't result. The government will be responsible for the destruction of tens of thousands of outpatient appointments next week and then even more the following week.
Again, as I said, the most effective way to resolve this issue is through the labour relations machinery, industrial relations machinery of the state. It's the most effective way to resolve all disputes of this kind, and the only way ultimately to do it. So that they're full, and that's understood and accepted across all of the social partners in respect of disputes, both within the public sector, indeed within the private sector as well. As I said, that there has been engagement between the parties yesterday at the WRC. I think it's important that those talks would continue, and that the full utilisation of the existing industrial relations machinery would be utilised, because that is the ultimate way of ensuring that we can get a resolution to this. Sorry?
Agree that DEPR should be present at the WRC?
DEPR are not present in the room of every dispute that occurs.
They are when disputes get settled.
Well, obviously, as a Department of Public Expenditure, representing the taxpayer, representing everybody, DEPR is always there as an influence. We know that. But the bottom line is there's always tic-tacking and things don't happen in isolation. And you know that as well as a trade unionist yourself. You know how
until they're in the room, with respect.
So that's Deputy Murphy's question. So